I don't see why any man would vote Democrat. It's not the party of virtue, security. It's not the party of strength. It's definitely not the party of family. And to be a man and then vote for a woman just because she's a woman is either childish, that person has mommy issues, or they're just trying to be accepted by other women. And I heard the scientists say the other day that when a man votes for a woman, he actually transitions into a woman.
No scientist said that, ever. But there you have it, guys. Sometimes they let, their little private parts show. That's their pitch. That's all they've got at this point to guys. That argument. The argument that I don't see why any man would vote for a Democrat unless they have mommy issues. That's their plan to appeal to a voter group that is must win for Donald Trump. This is lights out. He doesn't win men, and by a lot. Joining us now, one of the white guys who is currently supporting Kamala Harris for president, Pete Buttigieg. We should know that he's here in a personal capacity, which is why we're not calling him by his official title. It's not a sign of disrespect or familiarity. It's weird to call you Pete, but we'll go with it. I feel like the guys over at Fox and Trump benefit from the volume business of offenses. And let's just stop right there. I don't see why any man would vote for a Democrat. I can think of lots of reasons. Lots of them have daughters, like U.S. Jazz did. Lots of them care about the climate, care about peace, care about the economy. Why do you think any man would vote for a Democrat?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of classic projection, right? The very things he's talking about: virtue, strength, security, family. Those are all things that Trump's Republican Party has completely abandoned making any claim to. I mean, virtue, really? In a party led by Donald Trump with the affairs and the porn stars and everything else that's associated with that guy? Security? When we're talking about a party led by somebody who has been rolled repeatedly by figures like Putin and Xi Jinping, and family. My goodness. And this is what I think it really comes down to, is a lot of people at home are thinking about their families. I know I'm thinking about our family and how our family, my husband and the son and daughter that we're raising, are going to be so much better off if Kamala Harris gets elected, if Democrats win. Why? Because those policies are going to support our family. Look, they long ago sacrificed their claim to be the party of family, not just in terms of the, disturbing opposite of family values that leaders like Donald Trump showed, but also as they've emerged being against IVF, against the Affordable Care Act that means so much to so many families, talking about abolishing the Department of Education. They long ago walked away from any serious claim on being the party of family. And what you're seeing in those kinds of just Fox News freakouts, I think, is an inability to talk about this election in terms of what it's going to mean for our lives, which is why, just like Trump himself, they just try to outdo one another in outrageous and insulting statements.
It's interesting that you sort of put it that way, because if you say to them, well, the character matters, they say, no, it doesn't. Voters don't care about character. But it doesn't stop them from making the hypocritical arguments. And I guess the question I have on that is, when you were on Fox News, sort of the BS ends, and I saw you try to inject some reality-based information and data into a conversation about crime. What do you hear when you do that? Does that break through to anyone that only gets their news from Fox News?
Yeah, I think it's important to keep bringing those messages to Fox News, because if that's your main source of information, you might not hear about certain facts otherwise. I think many Fox viewers, through no fault of their own, other than that's where they're getting their information, so you can't be surprised if they don't know otherwise, but many Fox viewers may have never heard that crime went up under Trump and down under Biden and Harris. It's clearly a fact, but they literally might not know that. Same thing in terms of energy policy. I bet that if you polled viewers of those more conservative news outlets, they just wouldn't know that American energy production is at an all-time high, and that American energy independence is greater under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris than it was under Trump-Pence. These are matters of fact. People at home can go look them up. So I hope when I say that on Fox, if a viewer who's never heard that before says, how is that possible? They go ahead and look it up. And then they see that we're right, and it gives them one more reason to maybe listen to what we have to say the next time.
One of the areas where their disinformation has done the most damage is in installing election deniers in local election governance capacity. And I wonder if you've been tracking the reporting about some of the threats to certification in 2024 and what, as someone who sort of has a toe in that other side of the information ecosystem, where you think there's still an opportunity to inject facts and reality.
Yeah, it's a definite concern. I think the good news is Americans really don't stand for that, not just Democrats, but independents, voters as a whole. That was one of the big lessons of 2022, right? Anybody on the ballot, even people who were much hyped Republican candidates before 2022, any one of them who was an election denier lost their race during those midterms. And I think that shows that the American people don't have an appetite for that. Of course, what we've got to watch out for is when they do things that distort the democratic process or undermine elections and perversely try to do so while claiming that this is about election integrity. But this is one of many areas where the fact that the national Trump GOP is so out of line with the realities on the ground really matters, because people often know their election administrators, the volunteers from their community who staff those county-led processes where people do their level best to make sure that there is a flawless, free and fair election. And I think that's part of how we cut through that misinformation, is remind people the nonpartisan basis on which elections are run in this country, and remind everybody how important it is to show support and respect for this fundamentally American thing, how we safeguard the most important thing we have, which is our democracy itself.
All right.